Yeah, so actually, just to take a step back on the checklist, one of the things I did not want to do with the checklist was to just blue sky think about things that are good to think about as an investor when you're making an investment. I did not want to create a checklist in that way. What I wanted to do with the checklist was to create it based on real losses that some great investor had because they missed something elementary. And so every investor, no matter how good they are, has plenty of mistakes they're going to make. In fact, John Templeton says that if you're right 2 out of 3 times in the investing business, you're going to hit the ball way, way, way out of the park. So the good news of this business is you can have a very healthy error rate and still do quite well. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And so what I had done when we were creating the checklist was to look at permanent losses of capital that had occurred amongst investors that I had a great deal of respect for, and then try to reverse engineer why those losses might have occurred. And the easiest ones to do on that front were Buffett and Charlie Munger because they talk so much about their mistakes. And many other investors don't talk about their mistakes at all, and some fall in the middle. So in some cases, I had to kind of reverse engineer what I thought the mistake may have been. But in other cases, like with Berkshire, when I looked at Dexter Shoes or US Air or them buying Berkshire Mills and all these different investments they made, or NetJets, for example, um, the the nature of the mistake was obvious, and therefore coming up with a checklist question was easy. Um, some of the other ones took a little bit more work, but we were able to get there. Like before the financial crisis, Longleaf Partners had invested in General Motors, and they, of course, eventually GM went bankrupt. Of course, they lost a lot of money on that investment. And ironically, now I have an investment in GM, but it's not your father's GM anymore. So we looked at I had an intern who helped me do that, and so um, the checklist questions came out of real failures that I had in investments that had gone south for Pabrai funds and other great investors had, and so we end up with a list of 90 odd questions. So I wasn't particularly planning that the checklist should go in one direction or the other. It was really driven by the mistakes and what those questions were. And then when I reordered the checklist by category. What surprised me is that how beautifully they fell into a few different categories. So there's a significant number of questions, I think more than 20 plus questions, maybe 25 questions, which relate to various types of leverage and failures related to leverage things. Then there's another section that relates to moats and competitive advantage, shrinking moats or non-existent moats, or mistakes made in thinking about the moat and such. There's a lot of questions around that. Like Dexter Shoes in Berkshire's case, was Warren made a mistake about that moat. Um, then there's another section that is on management and ownership. What percent of the company does management own, how they compensated, how aligned are their interests. So all these questions related to management and ownership. And then we get to some miscellaneous areas like unions, organized labor, environmental issues, and things like that. But the top 3 or 4 categories basically took up most of those questions. And those are the most important things you would think about. You would think about leverage. You definitely would spend a lot of time thinking about moats and competitive advantage. And you definitely want to spend a lot of time thinking about the folks who were running the show, and what types of people in history and such that they had. And so to me, it was surprising how the most of the mistakes were in those areas.